my name is Andreas Breuer from Energy Networks, and I'm responsible for the R&D projects dealing with flexibility, and that's all about in this session right now. Complexity and how we deal with complexity in the future energy system. So imagine a world of the energy system where we have various solutions at the edge of the grid, like small generation, battery storages, but also consumption. And the more solutions we have in the grid, the more complex the challenge for our grid operators are. So during this session, we will give you an insight, in-depth look into workshops, into projects. We will start with 2 different projects for around 10 minutes each. One presented by Maik Staudt from Midnets. He's the R&D coordinator. And the second coming from Sweden, Engström. He's business developer from E.ON Sweden. And after they gave you a detailed view on 2 projects, also a dear colleague from me from Grid X, Jan, will join me on stage for a small Q&A session. So please welcome Maik Staudt. He will join us from Midnets Online. Hey, Maik.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So your plan today is to give us an insight on one of the most exciting European projects we have right now, right?
I hope so. It's EU Flex.
Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you. EU Flex, a European project, is about how could a future system looks like if a high share of RES is reality. And we, together with Energy, are dealing or enabling the German demonstrator. And I will start with drivers, challenges. I think you all know of it, that the increasing share of RES is expected, and that if this is increasing share, there could be a shortage, or there will be a shortage of the conventional redispatch potential. So if there are congestions, we need to use these renewables that are in the grid. And due to the fact that these renewables are connected within the distribution grid, there is a need for a TSO-DSO coordination. If the TSO has a need, he can't activate flexibilities within the distribution grid without the knowledge of the DSO. That will jeopardize with the grid operation of the DSO. And in total, there is a need for cost efficiency. And if we don't have this coordination, then this efficiency will decline, of course. And it's also if we only use far away from the, for example, congestion point located flexibilities, then we need to activate much more flexibility than it would be needed if we activate the closed ones. And the closed ones mostly are renewables. And therefore, we use some basic steps for utilize these services. As I said, the sustainable coordination is needed and was set up between the TSO and DSO. And then we need to estimate what flexibilities are available. And with this coordination process, we can, together with the TSO, select the needed flexibilities. The TSO can tell the DSO what flexibilities are needed within the distribution grid, and the DSO, of course, can inform the TSO in case of balancing or other things that are needed, and that together identifies within this data management what is needed and how we can bring it to the good optimal solution. And at the end, of course, if you activate flexibilities, there are some kind of settlement needed. So going more into details for the task we had to do, we developed some tools. Of course, not we. We had a partner Fraunhofer IE and the University of Kassel in Germany and the Nestec Institute in Porto, Portugal. So what tools do we need? The active and reactive flexibility range calculation. Of course, we need some strategies how to activate them that we will test within these tools. And there is also state estimation needed. If you want to have a power flow calculation, then the first step is to do this state estimation. And if we know the range that is available within the grid, we have to evaluate and calculate the flexibility range that is available at the TSO-DSO connection point. And at the end, we need some tools to activate to enable this flexibility use for both DSO and TSO. And we found out that only a combined active and reactive power optimization can lead to the most efficient solution. So that too as well indicates that this communication between DSO and TSO needs to be improved. And what information needs to be exchanged. For example, these windows, these PQ maps, what flexibility in active and reactive power is available, what set point is available. And that leads to a more reliable and efficient usage of this flexibility. And at the end, we want to solve not only physical congestions with overloading, but also voltage issues. So sometimes it's feasible if you have an overloading to raise the voltage, and so the congestion is eased. And also if there's not sufficient reactive power flexibility for these, so for solving the reactive power issues, for solving voltage problems, you can decrease at the right place in the grid the infeed of active power. And these are the first results of USysFlex. So you can see the active power flexibility in one of our grid regions at the aggregated point between us and the TSO 50 Hertz, and at the same time the reactive power flexibility. And now you can imagine if you activate some active power flexibilities, it will change the available potential of reactive power flexibilities. So that's the goal in the upcoming field test, to prove that these combinations, these combined optimization leads to this promised more efficient, more reliable process. And if you look into the future, it's not only as it is in USysFlex, the mandatory process with generators, that needs we also for the future want to combine these with loads, with the voluntary flexibilities. And therefore, we need a market interface. And to test this market interface, we have another European project. It's called E-Universal. So But that's maybe for another meeting.
Mike,
And yeah,
thanks very much for giving us this overview. By the way, Universal, we are also active in this environment and project. Let me give you one two short questions. Since EU Sysflix is a funded project by the European Commission, how can we make sure that the results also find their way into the implementation?
it's already, so to say, implemented in the grid control center. All the tools that we develop will be tested within our grid control center with a daily operation. So we are using one of our operators, and he has to test all the tools we developed. And at the end, he will say it's fine or not. And that is a first step to implement it in the grid control center for daily operation.
Okay.
And the other part is needed new regulation. It's we thought beforehand in EU Sysflex that's exactly now what is needed in Redispatch 2.0.
So I think it's the right point in time to step into these kind of projects, because coming from Midnets, for example, I think your challenge is there today. We are not talking about an upcoming future. We are talking about a realistic situation you are facing today, right?
Yes. Yes. In our grid, we have a share of renewables with our load over 100%. So
that's amazing.
Good that we have a TSO to send it away, but in our grid, it's over 100%.
Okay, and by the way, I also heard that you've been awarded for the German demonstrator.
Yes, that's true. Excellence Award in, I always forget, it's Energy Elites or something like that it was called.
So it also demonstrates that this one is a very innovative project. And our aim is also to pick up the results of this project, for example, for EU Universal, but also to bring it into the operational life. And by the way, therefore, we also within Energy Networks have a leadership team structure with an expert team really dedicated to the implementation part of the projects. So Mike, I thank you very much, and I was really happy to see that the online connection also was well working. So
yes.
Thanks for very much.
Digitalization.
That's right. Thanks very much for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you for having me.
So this was an insight of one of the biggest European funded projects we have in our portfolio. Second, and since we are a real international session today, I would like to welcome Adam. Adam Engström is business developer from E.ON Sweden, and I can see him on the screen. Hi, Adam. Also there, the connection seems to work. It's a pleasure to have you in our session. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I will be talking a bit about flexibility, and I'll actually try to cover the why, the what, and the how in this 10-minute presentation that I have. So to start off a bit, and you'll see that there are some similarities with what Mike was talking about as well. But to just talk briefly about the background and the drivers. Well, first of all, I think most of you know about the clean energy package. For us as a grid owner, as a DSO, this will change things quite a bit. We will go from more of a network operator to a system operator. There will be more responsibility on how we actually use our grids. And with this clean energy package on an EU level, there will also come regulation, and there will be incentivized flexibility in another ways. I would say that this is a big thing that's coming now. But to give you more on the why from a very local Swedish perspective, I would say this is more about what happened a bit over a year ago with actual capacity constraints in our grid. So in different urban parts of Sweden, not only in the E.ON grids, but we basically had a hard time connecting new customers. And I mean, we all know about new intermittent energy coming. This puts new demands on the grid. But in the dialogues we had with our TSO in Sweden, basically we learned that, okay, we need several years to reinforce the transmission grid. And meanwhile, we need to do something else, basically. And this is why I would say we kickstarted these projects within flexibility and used flexibility as a way of solving these very urgent issues that we have. So this all then started with also an EU-funded project called Coordinate. So we at E.ON in Sweden, we joined this project together with other DSOs in Sweden, the Swedish TSO and other partners to get an understanding of what do we need to do to address flexibility in Sweden. So I mean, the basic idea of flexibility is that we as a grid owner, I mean, we're basically willing to pay customers that already are connected to our grid to reduce their load during very specific times. I mean, this is not that everyone have to reduce their load all the time, but it's very specific times during very specific weather conditions that we actually need this flexibility in the grid. So the idea is to create some kind of interface, some kind of marketplace where we as a grid owner and our customers can meet and in some kind of supply-demand relationship create this flexibility market. But in this project, it was also very apparent that a marketplace, well, to get there, we need to go through a couple of other steps as well. So looking at the DSO side, I mean, we need to include flexibility when we plan our grids, when we operate our grids, and when we forecast what will happen in our grids in the future. But then also what I know that Mike talked about as well, the coordination between us as a DSO and the TSO, it needs to be there as well. And especially looking at the other, for example, balancing markets that are there already, a flexibility market can't just disrupt what's there already. It needs to be implemented in the same way and work together with the existing markets. And on the customer side, I mean, I think one thing was very apparent very fast. I mean, the customers, in order to provide flexibility to the grid, they need to be engaged. This is more than just pushing a button. We actually need to do something in terms of shifting your load, lowering your load, or doing something active. But in order to help the customers to do this, there are also lots of products around this that is needed to guide the customers to be able to do this. I mean, one example here would be possibility to aggregate energy, for example. But then also, we've talked a lot about the need to forecast, but also to have a quite granular, but a real-time metering to understand what's happening at our customer sites right now in terms of load. But once again, the main idea is for us to meet at this marketplace. And this was also what we did in Coordinate. So to give a bit more insights on what's happening now here in Sweden, we're still in this Coordinate project and we're still having demonstrations within Coordinate, but we're also dividing our work within flexibility now in two projects internally. So one is the one called Switch, and this is the one I think that some of you guys who are listening might have heard of. This is basically our flexibility platform that we are right now building up and commercializing. So these are the core of this in terms of the platform and the customer side of it. So not only E.ON can use this platform, but we're actually selling this to other DSOs in Sweden and hopefully in Europe soon as well to be able to create marketplaces within flexibility. But then the next one, the other project that came out of this work with flexibility we did within Coordinate is an internal project called NEO, which I would say is equally important because these are our own internal learnings in terms of how are we supposed to work with our grid planning, with our operations, when flexibility is being implemented more and more in Sweden, in our grids, but also in other DSO grids in Sweden. And to put some numbers on what we have done so far, we have had 2.3 gigawatt hours so far procured through our switch platform in different marketplaces in Sweden. So we've had now 10 different geographical markets in different grid areas tested, and we have had capacity sold through these marketplaces. But what I think is, well, almost the most promising thing with this is that this has not only been an internal E.ON project, but we have had lots of other DSOs actually working with us and with our switch marketplace to manage their own flexibility market. So far, a very interesting project, I would say. And to end this very short presentation, I'm actually going to show you guys a bit how it looks on our platform when you actually do these bids and these trades with flexibility. So the first thing here, you'll see a screen recording with a heat pump company or a heat pump actor who's now offering flexibility with their heat pumps. So what they're doing here is basically putting into the switch platform that we can now give between 5 and 50 megawatts. We can do it during certain times of this specific day, and our kind of the money we need to give out this flexibility or be flexible with our consumption is then 500 kronos per megawatt. So this is the kind of flexibility provider, the customer side of using this platform. And then if we go to the other side of it, what we can see here, I think the picture might be a bit small, but you see a purplish red straight line. This is basically how much capacity this part of the grid can handle. And what you can see on the blue graph, now that's a forecast of the projected loads that will be on this day. And what you can see is that the load forecast is over what the grid can handle. So that's a problem. We have a capacity issue. And what the platform does is that through our algorithms, it identifies this. It looks at, do we have any flexibility providers bidding out flexibility here? And then it's actually automatically matching price and capacity, and then going through with this bid, and then we have this capacity issue solved. So with that, thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing this insight into your project. As far as I understood, you're describing also a future role for the DSO's business. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah.
So where do you see us as E.ON, especially in the DSO's business?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think it's very clear that we are moving from just basically building new grids, new networks, to getting more and more of a responsibility in terms of the system itself. And I would say with that increased responsibility, I think whether we are incentivized very soon or coming forward, we will need to work with this. I mean, in the end, we can't keep just reinforcing grids and having big reinforcements of the grids everywhere. I mean, it's not economically and not socio-economically feasible. So I would say we will probably see even more work with flexibility going forward.
I will pick up a question which came in regarding e-mobility. Do you think that e-cars, especially, of course, the battery in the cars, will be part of the game regarding flexibility management?
Well, the very short answer, yes. I think it will. And I mean, there are lots of projects out there now looking at different ways of integrating car batteries or using e-mobility as this source of reducing peaks and working with flexibility. So I sure hope that this will come very soon, but I see it as really great potential, to say the least.
Okay. Thank you. A second question was around the implementation. So we learned a lot on which challenges you are facing, which solutions you are developing. As far as I understood also, you're designing a marketplace. But how are we implementing, or what are we implementing out of these research and development projects? How do we create value for us?
Yeah. Now I would say the very clear value for us here in Sweden is that Switch has been live to solve the very urgent capacity issues we had, and we keep using Switch to solve there will take lots of times before the TSO have had time to reinforce our transmission grids in Sweden. So until then, I see Switch as a very necessary player in that sense. And just now in November, we're launching new markets in other regions of Sweden. And we see this as basically a necessity to keep connecting our customers to our grid in Sweden.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the very direct value, I would say.
Okay. Adam, thanks very much for your contribution. It was a huge challenge regarding being online from Sweden. I really enjoyed this. And thanks very much and have a great day. So now we are back on stage. And on my right, I want to introduce young Bergholz from GridX. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure.
So we both learned out of the two presentations that flexibility is a real challenge, or let me call it the other way. It's one of the big topics if we focus on the DSO level.
Yes.
You with GridX, what is your contribution towards flexibility?
Generally speaking, our contribution is directly on the lowest level of the whole pyramid, from the energy manufacturers or producers down to the end customers. We see ourselves at the assets, like controlling directly the assets and doing, effectively load management at that end.
So I also learned from GridX. GridX is a startup. How brave do you have to be to step with this brilliant idea into a startup, which might be, out of my side at least, very risky?
Well, I'm now stepping a little bit out of my knowledge zone and into what I picked up from the founders thus far. As far as I know, it has been a challenge. You need the braveness, the bravery to go out first of your comfort zone into the unknown and just try something that isn't yet either on the market itself in something entirely new, or compete with other companies about a spot already present. Right. And in this case, I guess the underlying goal, the underlying idea was, of course, to do something better in this world, to control the assets, to do load management, to work for a more efficient future, and perhaps even a cleaner one.
Well, and if we deep dive into your solution, I found out that you're dealing also with a cloud-based solution. Yes. Since I'm working in this environment of R&D and in the utility business since a couple of years, I also understood that introducing cloud solutions to a very somehow conservative utility is a huge challenge. How are you dealing with that, since the utility industry is your customer, right?
Yeah, so we're dealing this with two phases or two parts to our product lineup. One, of course, is the online solution, the cloud-based system that is customer-facing, where the customer can control and visualize first the assets that he has and the power that he's dealing with, either producing or consuming or storing. and then we have a hardware part where we actually do the control. So the difficulty that you were describing earlier, it's of course it is difficult, especially with dealing with larger companies who are more on the conservative side of things, and we have to face those difficulties, work against them, and try to discuss with them, show them the upsides, talk to the right people, and get a foot in the door.
Okay. So regarding the flexibility topics, we think that also in future we will find aggregators. Will then GridX, for example, be some of these aggregators?
And that is, of course, a possibility when going up the chain from the assets a step further, for example, combined assets, and then, of course, aggregating the data, aggregating the loads. This is a possibility.
Yeah. I think one of the major challenges for a startup is always to have a proof of concept in the real life,
yes,
so to say. How did you manage that?
The main point here was, of course, state-funded research, where we are very thankful for. The majors, well, not majors, but largest project in this case is, of course, Smart Quad, which we are also in cooperation with E.ON, and very heavily so.
One of our biggest lighthouses time being, right?
Yeah. Yeah, where we do the load management and control of 3 different smart districts, building them up, 2 here in North Rhine-Westphalia, and 1 in Rhineland-Pfalz. I'm sorry, I do not know the English translations of those names.
So what is your part in this project?
I am the project manager on the GridX side, coordinating with the partners and leading the internal coordination with the dev team, the solution management, and so on, trying to get it all as smoothly as possible done.
I think that might also for other startups be a good opportunity to, in the first step into research and development projects, show that they understood how are the challenges in our environment and that they can prove their concepts. Also, I learned during the last years that resources is always a problem for small startups. How do you handle that?
There, of course, I do not have the in-depth look about our whole budget or resource management on that side. A big part is, of course, supplied by investors. Then, of course, running projects that we do with partners, and of course also research projects as the one I mentioned already and other ones. So research projects in particular here are a great opportunity to establish oneself due to the difficulties, due to the newness or the novelty of the product that we are dealing with here. First showing that it works on the market and then, in the research environment, and then being able to do the jump up into a real market world.
Since we also have a big interest in implementing all the different results we found, this also counts also for you. So if you prove the concept, what will be then the next steps?
The next steps, ideally, is of course a standard product that we can roll out to customers in a plug-and-play solution.
Maybe in cooperation with us, right?
Perhaps in cooperation with you, ideally in cooperation with you, in this case. For one, to make it easy, to make it cheap, and that the benefit of the product, of this district solution that we are building up in this case, is can be enjoyed and can be beneficial to a greater community.
And I think in that case also big R&D projects can help you also to step out of the German market to be more a European solution, right?
The thing is, I think you know that better than I do, the difficulties when you step from one nation to another, there come their own requirements, boundary conditions you have to face on the energy market specifically, since, well, it's in Europe it's easier, but when we look, for example, overseas or in different environments, there are certain obstacles to overcome.
Yeah, since we implemented a certain leadership team structure in energy networks with expert teams also really focused on implementation, I think at least our strategy is also to pick up solutions coming from you or other startups and verify whether we can directly implement that at least in this area where we started this project, but with a focus also to extend that business. Then how long are you active with this startup right now?
Me?
You and the startup
The
itself.
The startup itself. If I now say something wrong, my boss will jump here. And but I think it was established in 2014, around that time frame, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will pick up a question coming online. A colleague asked, are you still in the development of this solution? Do you have clients or still in partnering?
If he's referring to the smart district solution, then yes, we are in development there. We have a base solution ready for rollout, I think, by the end of this year. And but that will be the base one, and we have the wish to build upon that, make it even better than we hope it will be by then.
Okay. In introducing your solution into our environment of infrastructures, is there something you would wish from our side? So what could we make easier for you, or what could we make better or be more open?
Well, openness, of course, mindful flexibility, I think fits here very well, but also standardizing certain, specifically on the asset side, the communication protocols that we are dealing with, because at the end of the day, we have to speak with each and every asset on the field, in the field, may it be smart charging solution, may it be electrolyzers or other more exotic equipment. And the easier it is to control them, the easier it is to speak to them, to get their signals, to send out control messages. The faster we can implement, the faster we can work, and the more efficient can the solution be in the end.
Okay, so you're more addressing this standardization topic towards us as being some kind of an ambassador, because the standardization is also focusing on manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
Connecting assets to the grid.
Now, that I think wouldn't be specifically pointed towards you, being a representative of E.ON. From the E.ON side, to build on my previous answer, I think an option there would be an interconnectiveness between the DSO and the direct market, how we connect that, how we build virtual power plants, for example, and thereby use the flexibilities that are already currently present on the market.
Yeah, okay, understood. So how do you intend to monitor and control, or where, phrase it in another way, where do you get the data you need for your solution?
Well, first of all, from the assets themselves. Like a battery will tell us how full it is, the charging status, for example. But then also from external sources, like when we think about forecast-based energy management systems that we are dealing with here, thinking about something as simple as how will the weather be tomorrow? How will, and then some more complicated system, how will the market be tomorrow? What are the estimates there? Is there the possibility to buy in cheap electricity that I can store in the assets locally at a later time? Or is it better to sell the flexibility I currently have back to the market due to some demands currently present? This, of course, isn't yet established and is a great opportunity.
Well, that's one of the very important questions regarding sensors and dealing with data. Are you talking about real-time communication?
It depends. As an engineer would answer. Now, the thing is, real-time control is necessary on the lowest level to react to changes in the load management. From the upper source, a more slower communication would be possible, not in direct control of assets just going through us, for example, but more as functions, as goals being set or thresholds being set?
Well, that out of my side, a brilliant answer, because any answer you're giving has directly impact on how we build up our, for example, communications infrastructure. And if you would have said, I always need real-time data, that will be a huge challenge and also huge cost.
Yes, and we want to negate those at all costs.
Okay, Jan, thanks very much for joining me on stage. We are nearly at the end of this wonderful session. Please allow me one final comment. Beginning of November, we will have an internal deep dive session. We call it Grid Novation, and you're all invited to join. Thank you.